Welcome, everyone. This is number one, the very first 2021 bi-weekly Wednesday webinar by the Bicycle Coalition of Maine. And as the title would indicate, we're hoping to do two of these about a month. And we're going to go through exactly what to expect. This first webinar is all about being safe when biking after dark in the winter.
And having fun while doing it.
And having fun. As you can tell, we're having fun right now, trying to entertain everyone.
I gotta take my layer.
Too hot.
I'm too hot.
I have my shorts on. I'm good.
Too much information, perhaps.
So just to give you a quick preview, these are some of the upcoming webinars in the series. In 2 weeks from today on February 24th, same time, we're going to be talking about safe cycling, the do's, the don'ts, and the downright dangerous. And this is going to be a all ages and get everyone together in the family. Let's talk about common misconceptions, things people do wrong, and what all of us can do just to ensure that we're having a safe and enjoyable bike ride. The third one, that's in March 10th, same time again, is going to be called No Cyclists Left Behind, Hot Tips on Forming or Finding Chill Rides. I'm really excited about this webinar as well. We're going to have some guest speakers at all of them. And on that third one, we're going to be talking about forming slow rides, how to get together with people in your community or people in a different community and feel like everyone can be included and there's no pressure. Get to know the area, see some sights, have fun. And then there's a list below that, starting with bicycling with children, and it goes on, you can read it on your own. These are some of the topics that we're gearing up to provide later in the winter and spring and into the summer. And we would love to hear from you, whether it's right now in the chat window or email us. You can email Eric, E-R-I-K, at bikemaine.org or Jim at bikemaine.org. And let us know what you think as far as what you would like us to talk about during these webinar series. So really the sky's the limit. If it's about bikes, if it's about pedestrian safety, advocacy, encouragement, schools, we'd love to talk about it. So please let us know.
And certainly if you are an expert on a topic that you think would be of interest to BCM membership and other folks, let us know that too, and we'll set you up as a guest speaker and involve you in the conversation in the process.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So I'm going to turn off screen share now. We'll come back to that a little bit later, but for now, I just wanted to give everyone a quick glimpse as to what we would be doing. And now let's get right into the thick of winter biking, and at night especially. So we would like, go ahead, Jim, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to preview the discussion tonight where, Eric and I have broken it down into a few kind of subtopics. Safety, how to be safe while you're out there, because we are committed to safety. Comfort, so that you don't end up at the end of your ride feeling like a cold, damp rag. And what you need to do to kind of maintain your bike while you're riding in wintry conditions and salt and slush and stuff like that. So those are kind of the three broad topics we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so to begin with, we're each taking a little bit of a side here. I really, both of us take both sides, but just for the sake of this webinar, I'm going to take the side of, let's try to do this. Let's try to bike in the winter, in the night, and not go too far out and make ourselves different than what we would normally do when we go outside, let alone even just get on a bike. So for that matter, basic things I would do would be prepare. And the first thing I do on any bike ride is put a helmet on. And some of the extra things I would do in the winter when I go on a bike ride are the same things I might do when I go out for a long walk on the sidewalk or anything of that nature. I just want to make sure I'm wearing layers and I'm comfortable. And so there's a notion sometimes when you pick up a cycling magazine, especially, that you might need to go get some specialized gear in order to fit in during a winter ride. And that isn't necessarily required. So,
right. You guys y'all live in a wintry place. You know about winter. Y'all own some warm clothes. You've already got pretty much the gear that you need to be successful and comfortable while riding in the winter. And we'd like to hear something about like how you guys do it. But Eric and I are going to start with a little bit of like how we kit ourselves out. And Eric, you want to go first?
Yeah, well, so I particularly find that keeping, just talking about cold weather first, I find that keeping my legs really warm, especially my knees, is super helpful. So if I might be very warm as I'm pedaling, but if my knees, especially that joint gets cool, I suffer. So I tend to wear long johns starting in the winter, and I leave them on until spring. And I do change them; they're not the same pair. But I like to keep the long johns really help my legs stay warm, and it keeps the blood going to my feet staying warm, and it keeps that joint, my knees, nice and cozy. And sometimes if I'm on a casual ride, I'm just gonna put a pair of jeans or slacks on top of my long johns, as long as it's not snowing or hailing or raining. If it's dry weather, a regular pair of trousers or pants can work. And this is for a casual ride. I tend to wear boots all the time. I know there are people out there, and there are some nice pieces of equipment that can keep your feet warm. But I just have a nice heavy pair of insulated boots, and I throw those on my feet. And I never have to worry about my feet getting cold or wet because my winter boots are there. So that takes care of my lower body. The upper body is a little bit more tricky. I might wear the regular clothing that I would go out on a walk on, but I tend to find that it's really what it can be difficult, especially when it's really cold out, is starting at a comfortable temperature and staying at a comfortable temperature. So just like Jim was saying, like go out wearing layers. It's really helpful to have clothing with zippers, because if I'm wearing a jacket and I'm getting hot, I can just zip it down, let some breeze enter. If you have a fleece underneath with a zipper, then you can zip that down also. And now you got some cool air hitting your t-shirt or whatever you're wearing underneath. And that really helps just moderate temperature. If I'm heading to the store, if I'm still working in an office, or in the future, if I'm returning to an office setting, it's really unpleasant to arrive sweaty. And so being able to moderate my temperature and release hot air that I'm creating through muscle movement is really important. So, and then my hands are one of those things that everyone's a little different. I have friends that can go out in like thin gloves any time of year. I actually find that gloves can work for me if it's above freezing. When it gets really cold, if I'm on a road bike or a bike that doesn't require a lot of dexterity on the handlebars, like a commuter bike, I'm just kind of cruising around, I might put on my like heavy duty mittens, because they're going to keep my hands happy, and that's really what is important for controlling the bike and staying safe. There's also this really cool piece of equipment that I don't know how many of you have seen, but this particular model is called a bar mitt, and they go on a handlebar. So I've set it up so that you can see the one side without the bar mitt and the other side with the bar mitt. And it's nice, it's neoprene, it stays attached to the handlebar so it doesn't get pushed down. And my whole hand can go in, and I can, even with a thin pair of gloves, I can still manage to control the brake lever and shift gears if necessary. So these are really helpful. They're called pogies. They might have other names out there. They are certainly popular already on snowmobiles and on ATVs. And in the cycling world, they're also quite popular in cold climates like Maine. So they're not super expensive, but do make a big difference, especially if you suffer from poor circulation or you just want to ride and it's really cold. And then the head, this is pretty common for me, especially with COVID-19. This isn't like the most robust fabric to use to protect against the virus, but it does work fine. It works. I feel like I am comfortable wearing it on a bike path, or if I'm driving my bike downtown and there's other people around. It's really easy to just pull up and cover myself so that I'm staying a little bit safer and helping others around me. Wearing a mask can be really difficult. It also doesn't protect the neck as well, but do whatever you feel is comfortable. This is really nice because it goes up, goes under my hat, and then I just have a regular winter hat on. I don't have a special helmet lid or anything like that. And then the glasses. So if it's sunny, I wear glasses to protect myself from the sun. But the best place for glasses, and even sometimes I'll take my daughter, we have this little shotgun seat that goes on top of the top tube, and she'll ride with me. She's only 3, and she'll wear glasses too. But if it's snowing lightly, or if it's sleet or hail, or something that you might get caught in. This lets you see. Otherwise, you get stuff going in your eyes, and you're hiding your eyes behind your eyebrows. I mean your eyelashes, and it's really hard to see, and it's frustrating, and it creates a lot of unpleasantness. So, being able to see is just part of it. So, um, point is, like, be comfortable with what you got at home, and if you feel like you're going to go out for a really hard ride, then I think Jim's going to have some tips right now. Go for it, Jim.
Okay. Well, so I'm going to echo, most of what Eric said. I'm a skier, so when I go out to ride my bike, I usually think about, I'm going out cross country skiing, and so I try to dress in a way that I will be warm enough, but not too warm if I'm on a recreational ride. For a commute or a utility ride, I'm just like Eric. I'm just gonna. I love those lined LL Bean pants. I got nylon ones and denim ones, and those things just work great if you're just going to commute to work. I usually dial back my intensity if I'm riding to work so I don't get too sweaty. And I would generally probably dress a little bit more warmly for a commute than I would for a recreational ride, because I'm going to be riding a little less intensely. But if I'm going to go out for like, a hammer or a good hard recreational ride, I dress expecting to sweat, basically. So again, I think about dressing as if I were going to go out and skate ski or something like that. So I'll be in lighter layers. As Eric said, possible to vent is important. Same thing. I found I probably run a little harder than Eric. I got these Pearl Izumi gloves, these lobster claws, which let you kind of group your fingers together, which are super warm, and I only use on pretty cold days. Most of the time, I'm just wearing kind of a utility beater glove. Often, I will just wear a thin little lid that I can then put my helmet on, and so it doesn't, it's not too warm, but it gives me a little something. If I need a little bit more, I'll wear maybe a buff as well, because if I get my neck warm, I'm super warm. And I have a balaclava, which you might have seen me wearing earlier, for those days when it's really cold. And as Eric said, I'll often wear glasses on my ride, especially if there's anything coming down. Helmet is, of course, key. I think that the most important thing to think about when you're going out for a good hard winter ride is if you're warm when you start, you're probably overdressed. My rule is always like, be a little cold when you start, because you're probably going to warm up plenty. And it's important to make sure that, if you're dressing in layers, you just peel off layers as you need to maintain a good temperature. You can throw it back on. Sometimes I'll carry like a little belt pack if I want to throw stuff that I take off into that, or if I need to carry an extra layer, if I think I might be, running into colder temps. So, having a pack or something that you can stow gear in, or carry additional equipment in, is super helpful. Other than that, I also, I wear I'm wearing kind of a dedicated bike shoe, but it's not a particularly fancy one. It's an old 510. But pretty much any kind of light hiking shoe will work well. A lot of them have Gore-Tex within them now, so they're pretty waterproof. If I know that I'm going to be commuting into really slushy conditions, a trick that I learned is, short of having a neoprene bootie to put over your shoe, you can actually take a plastic bag and put that over your toe, put that in your shoe, and then you can ride in and actually not get all kinds of slop on your feet, and keep yourself a little bit more comfortable that way. But, with respect to dressing, I think we're pretty much on the same page. I think that most people who live in a cold climate have the clothing that they need. And I think that the important rule of thumb is that if you're going out to ride recreationally, and if you're already a bike rider, you know what it's like to go out and ride hard. You just have to figure, I am going to get hot, and I need to have a way to kind of manage temperature and take layers off and be able to carry them with me. But that tip about starting cold, I think, is a good one to make sure that you can, warm up and be comfortable. Beyond that, the next, thing, we're talking about night riding. So that's kind of winter riding. And this is still, on the subject of equipment, lights are something you are going to need for night riding. I run Night Rider lights for the most part these days. I've tried all kinds of cheap ones and just been completely frustrated. There's nothing like being out on a night ride and have your light just quit. Most of the cheaper ones have done that to me at one time or another. The Night Riders are, I think they're like 75 to 120 bucks. So they're a little bit pricey. There are less expensive models out there that you can still find for reasonable prices. I mean, I've seen decent lights for about 35 bucks, and I own some. Often they'll come in two pieces where you'll have the headlight and the battery pack separately. What's that? The Illuminite makes one, and that's like 35 bucks. But the one thing about night riding, especially if you're going to be riding trails, and riding a fat bike or a studded mountain bike on trails, like having a good light makes all the difference in how effectively and comfortably you'll be able to ride. And if you're riding on the road, of course you're able to navigate what's in front of you, but you're also letting drivers see you clearly with good lights. And whenever I know I'm going to be on the road, I do make sure I have a tail light. So even tonight I just came back from a ride, and I just ran into just twilight, and I do have a tail light that's always on my trail bike that I just turn on when I'm making that final commute home. So, dressing appropriately, having lights, wearing a helmet, all basic kind of safety and comfort equipment.
And on the note of lights, I agree with everything Jim said. Like
I'll go get those other ones.
when I'm mountain biking, I really try to have some quality lights to make sure I can see very well, because otherwise it's just not very enjoyable. But if you're just going out and you want to like stop by Hannaford's to get something quickly and it's just down the road, something like this can work really well. So this is just a set of Blinky lights. There's a white one for the front and there's a red one from the rear. If you're in an area with a lot of street lights and you feel like you could see adequately what's in front of you, then something very simple like this and inexpensive is going to help make sure that other people can see you at least. Should be good. It's good to know also that Maine state law does require that any bicycle operating at night has a white front light and a red or amber rear reflector. I think you should have a red light on the back as well. And you should have some sort of reflective material or a light material on your ankle. And actually, there's a really cool device. Actually, Jim gave this to me this past winter. But this is, there's a couple ways to do this, but this is the most simple design. It's a reflective strap. In fact, together with the Department of Transportation, the Bicycle Coalition in Maine has given away thousands of these. They just goes around your ankle, keeps your pant leg, if you're wearing something baggier, from getting caught in the moving parts of the bike, and it's very reflective. This is a higher quality model of the same thing. And the cool thing about this is that it can actually flash. So it's hard to see on Zoom, but it's reflective material and it lights up. These things aren't really expensive, but something like this plays a double role. It's going to keep my clothing in check so it doesn't get caught in the chain. And it's going to also signify to a lot of people as that I'm sharing the road with, if I'm on a roadway, that as my foot's going up and down and pedaling, this reflective light that's flashing back and forth, or reflecting headlights back to the driver of a vehicle, is a great indication that up ahead is a cyclist. So something simple, if you're in an area that's well lit, so a more urban area, can work really well. The other thing I would really recommend too is, and something that you get as you spend more money on lights is, I'm not going to do it now because I don't know what it would do to all your eyes, but this light's similar to what Jim has on his head. It can go on a handlebar as well. It's got a nice little strap, and this is one of the more expensive lights. The battery's all intact. You can get these at Walmart too. They're not quite as nice as this, but nice things about these more expensive ones and the ones that are sort of like designed well are that you can plug it right into a USB charger that we all have for our phones most of the time. And it's really easy and quick to charge. They have a little battery meter so you know what's going on. When you buy something that's really cheap or generic, something from overseas, it sometimes doesn't have that sort of feature. But one of the things I really wanted to talk about, this light, and maybe Jim's too, is that it's got a whole bunch of settings. One of the best ones I really like for riding in well-lit but urban areas at night is the setting where it pulses the light rather than just flash, flash, flash all the time, which can make it difficult. It's almost like a strobe for people that are sharing the road with me. I want to make sure that they can see me well. So this has a nice flash that pulses and it changes its frequency. So it's interesting. It doesn't just get lost in the shuffle of the side of the road. So something to think about with nicer lights.
Yep, and I just wanted, I was running around. This is that model I was talking about. This kind of light you can actually find on the web for about $35. Super bright. It's a little heavy. It's got the two-part system. And I will confess, this is about the fourth version of this particular light I've had, because they work great for about a year and a half, and then they let you down. And so spending a little bit money, it definitely makes your night riding experience better. And, you know, there's nothing worse, you know, than if you were out on a trail covered with snow, and you've only got one light and it goes down on you. It's a complication.
I walked out of the woods once for an hour with that same light that Jim just showed, because it lasted 15 minutes, and that was far enough to get pretty far into the woods. And this was back in the day. All I had was a little flip phone, and I just kept having to turn, like, hit a button once in a while, and I like this little glow as I walked out. So it's really frustrating. So just, yeah, take
The
you
one
get
thing
what
we
you pay
kind of,
for.
we were kind of talking about that. You know, you don't necessarily need to spend a lot of money to gear yourself up for winter riding. I mean, a bicycle is good to have, you know, some warm clothes that you already have, a helmet, but spending a little money on the light can really make a difference in how successful you are. And, you know, before we leave the subject of clothing, you know, some of you may be skiers, and one of the things I'll wear on a really cold day is just one of my older ski helmets, because I love that it's got the ear flaps. And so when it's really cold, I'll just wear this. And I don't have to worry about wearing any kind of underlayer. It's got vents in it. So again, you know, repurpose the stuff you got. I mean, your cross-country ski kit, your downhill kit, it'll all work on a bike too. And yeah, don't let clothing you know, be a limitation. You've got the clothing you need. And probably you've all heard the phrase before, you know, cotton kills. I don't know if it actually necessarily will kill you if you're out night riding in the winter, but the problem with cotton is that if you're wearing a t-shirt and even cotton briefs or you know, Eric's waffle stomper long johns, the white ones, is that what you got, Eric? The one
Not white. They're like olive green. I don't know if they make those white ones
I'm
anymore.
sure they're tech fabric, but you know, the cotton things, once they get wet, they stay wet, and so they can really contribute to a chill. So if you know you're going to do some sort of, you know, multi-mile ride into the side country, you know, think about that. You don't want to feel like a damp rag out in you know, 20-degree weather, you know, so you sweat it into it and you really can't get warm again. So, you know, I always recommend wear some kind of tech fabric against your skin rather than cotton. If you're going on that harder recreational ride, if you're commuting and it's not too far, you know, whatever, you got to work. You know, the other thing we haven't really talked about, but we kind of started on it is, you know, when you're riding in the winter, you know, obviously you still follow all the rules of the road and the best practices for safe bicycling. So, you know, you do want to be visible, and you know, lights will certainly help with that. You want to, of course, ride with traffic. You want to be predictable and signal your intention. So all the rules that you would apply on summer riding, you know, nothing changes, of course, in the winter, except that the surface is a little weirder. And you know, there's techniques to manage icy conditions, and there's also equipment that helps you manage icy conditions. And I'll mention the technique because Eric's got the equipment to show off. But you know, when you're riding in the winter, particularly if there's any slush, slop, or snow or ice on the surface you're riding on, you know, no sudden movements. It's like, I'm really thinking about trying to keep my bike wheels more or less upright, even when I'm cornering. So you're not really like leaning the bike over much, because that just causes you to squirrel right out. No sudden movements, a little bit slower, perhaps a little bit more careful on the turns. And, you know, really, you're looking ahead and you're anticipating changes in line that you might have to make to deal with blocks of snow in the road. Don't always think that those chunks of snow are soft, because they're often not. They're often ice blocks, and if you hit one of those, it's a little like hitting a rock. But in addition to technique, there is technology that can help you deal with icy conditions. And Eric, talk to us about tire tech.
The easiest thing to do if you don't want to go get special gear is let some air out of your tires. It's an old practice. If you driving on soft conditions, whether it's a vehicle or a car, truck, let some air out, and that gives you a wider surface area, a larger patch of rubber that's connecting you to the road. So that can really work well. I commuted for years when I lived in Boston, in snow with just a regular set of road tires, maybe a little bit wider, not super narrow things, but I would just let some air out when it was sloppy out, just to give me that little bit of added cushion, so I don't feel like I'm riding on the knife's edge of this rubber strip every pedal revolution. But beyond that, there's some things that I do when I don't expect a lot of ice, but I know there's snow. If I have a bicycle and it's got slick tires on it already, I can go out and get a relatively inexpensive set of tires, make sure they fit, that have some texture, some knobs, some gives you a more aggressive bite. And that can really help when the snow conditions start to make a slick tire slip out. The worst enemy though on a bike is ice. And it, just like on a car, like you hit ice, it's really scary. If you're going fast in a car, like you can actually crash and it can be awful. On a bike, it's just like you hit the ice and that's it. It's like you tip over. There's nothing there connecting you to the earth anymore. It's just pulling on you. And the best way to combat ice, especially black ice, which you can't predict very easily, is studs. So this is the wheel. I took it off the front of my commuter bike. My commuter bike's really simple. It's got 3 gears. It's got a derailleur in the back, but I hardly shift. It just stays in like one place all the time. And it gets rusty, but I try to rinse it off as much as we can. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But these are the tires I keep on that. And so these tires are studded. They're aggressively lugged with rubber, but they also have these metal studs, the same as you might find on a car or truck winter tire, actually. And they work supremely well. The nice thing about a tire like this, which is designed for more casual riding, is that it's got like a relatively solid center strip of rubber, so that there's not a huge amount of added friction. But the studs here do bite into ice when you encounter it, especially black ice. So I can ride on an ice rink with this. And as long as I'm not being too aggressive and leaning over the way Jim was advising not to do, this will keep me upright. It gives me traction to stop, steer, and accelerate when necessary. So this is one. I'm going to show you one more option too. I do have a fat bike, and I like to ride my fat bike recreationally. There are people out there that have fat bikes. Fat bikes are bikes with really wide tires. And there are people out there that ride their fat bikes in the winter as a commuter bike. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of rubber and surface area connecting you to the road. They feel very stable. There's an incredible amount of traction. And you can get studded fat bike tires too. That last tire I showed you was a production tire. If I go to a bike shop, I could buy that same tire. This tire was a regular 3-season tire, or 4-season with snow. And these are actually little studs that I screwed in myself. And they're not, you can go online and Google like self-studded bicycle tires. As long as you have a piece of rubber, a lug that's thick enough, you can buy a tool and buy these little tiny studs and screw them in. And this tire, so you can see how often I've studded it. These 2 are studded, and then this one, and then these 2, and then that one. And because I'm studying it myself, I wasn't going to add 200 studs per tire, but this has worked very well for me. You can buy a fat bike tire that comes pre-studded. I find them a little expensive, and I like the option of doing it myself. I try to always go
Eric,
first.
Is that tire pre-drilled for studs? Because
nope.
Some tires do have, like you can buy like the Bontrager Narwhal, you can get it and it's pre-drilled to accept studs, and you can do that same kind of studding operation. But clearly you don't absolutely have to have them pre-drilled, and you can get a kit that'll do it. We have a question from Kiri about do you absolutely need to have studded tires for your fat bike for winter riding? And my answer to that would be pretty much. We get a lot of melt freeze conditions in Maine, and you can get away without a studded tire when this, like right now, the snow is not too bad. It's a little bit soft in places and kind of tacky. But as soon as it gets any kind of glaze on it, the stud really makes a difference between, you moving and staying upright and then not moving and going down. So I understand that they are expensive. Eric's, do-it-yourself studying approach is one way to beat that expense, but I really do prefer riding with studs. What about you, Eric?
Yeah, I tried to. For a long time, I didn't have studded tires,
Yeah, me too.
and I didn't know about them, and then they just weren't very common, at least to my knowledge. And now I have them on my fat bike. As long as there's snow on the ground and there's a chance of ice, I just leave them
Yep.
on a fat bike. At least that specific to that question that Kiri asked. If I'm on a fat bike, I'm generally on snow for the most part. And if I'm on snow, studs don't impede progress or speed it in any way. But if I hit a small patch of ice, then I'm going to be good. And you know what? It's really fun to ride a fat bike on frozen bodies of water. So I'll do some rides that either pass over frozen creeks or ponds or lakes, or I'll just go out and specifically ride my bike, do a little circumnavigation around the perimeter of a frozen lake. And it's a really fun way to experience that environment. And it's not possible to do without studded tires. So
Yeah, totally not. I remember like the first fat bike I had riding with Brian Dans, who some of you might know, and he had just had a mountain bike, that a 29-inch mountain bike wheel with studs on it, and we were riding on snowmo trails up near in the Bethel area, and we had to go across this just gigantic ice flow, and he just cranked through that with no problem on his studded skinny tire. On my fat tire, the contact patch is big, but it's still kind of slippery. And so I was like, I had both my feet down, just kind of like, meh, just kind of skiing down it and balancing the bike. And that was the day I decided, I'm going to get some studs. And studded tires, again, are something you can spend a lot of money on. And unfortunately, the more money you spend, um, the better the performance is. Both Eric and I started out with a pair of pretty inexpensive studded tires that were under $100, and they just really they weren't crisp tires. They just didn't accelerate well. They didn't roll well. They were unpleasant after a while, and both of us have upgraded. Yeah, grip studs are the original DIY studs. I'm seeing more comments here. There are generic options available as well. Back when I used to live in Vermont, we used to actually self-stud with a number 6 panhead screw. I mean, if you really want to do it yourself, you take a drill with a very thin bit. You run the drill through the lugs that you want to stud, and you run a thin sheet metal screw from the inside out, and the pointy end protrudes out of the lug, and then you have to put some sort of liner between the the screw heads and your tube. We used to split tubes and kind of run them in there and then fill them up. And that was the old school. Paul is saying it was totally old school. That was before you could buy studded tires, or if you could even buy them, they were like prohibitively expensive. But my God, we used to like stud those tires on our old 26-inch mountain bikes, and we could go up stuff, snowmobile trails in the winter that we actually could not get up in the summertime. So the grip was good. They were horribly heavy. And the length of the screws made them absolutely horrible to ride on anything but ice or snow. But there are options, but the commercially produced studded tires are marvels to ride on these days. And they're expensive because not that many people make them.
yeah, the do-it-yourself option's great though. That grip studs, check it out, and they're kind of expensive. They're $1 each, but there's generic versions out there as well. The other thing about bikes that we didn't talk about yet is are fenders. And fenders are another one of those things that they were off my radar for the longest of times when I was biking and I was younger. And when I got them, I just wondered, why didn't I get these sooner? So like the studs, there are do-it-yourself versions. You can take old 2-liter bottles, cut them up, and attach them to your bike, and it works. And the idea of the fender is two-part. You're protecting most of your bike from the slush and other junk, corrosive elements that are on the road in the winter, and you're protecting your body and your eyes and your face. It's really unpleasant to go for a ride through slush or wet road conditions, and you end up just getting covered in the stuff. And fenders do an excellent job of reducing the amount of wear and tear on the bike, and they keep your clothing and your face and your body just much cleaner. So if you don't
Yeah,
have fenders on a bike and you're really dedicated to riding in all conditions, not just dry road conditions, I would really advocate for finding some fenders. They come in all different sizes for every wheel diameter, for every tire width. And you can get pretty inexpensive ones that are made out of plastic, or you can get
yep.
very nice ones that are made out of stainless steel and are super classy looking. So they even
But
make them
yeah,
for road bikes.
I totally agree with that. And Planet Bike, there's a few other companies that make the plastic ones. They're cheap. They're I think the last pair I bought was sub $50. And they have multiple mounts, so they're very stable. They're complete coverage of the wheel. But some of you guys might know of the guy Bike Snob, Eben. I forget his last name. He's a writer. Now he's writing for Bicycle Magazine. He's very humorous. Just check out his book, Bike Snob, if you ever get a chance. But I remember being struck by something he said, which is absolutely true when you think about it. It's not the stuff that's coming out of the sky that makes weather unpleasant to ride in generally, because you can always shell up for that. It's the gunk that comes off the road that's just horrible to deal with. And it's like, if you've ever been behind someone who doesn't have fenders and they're showing a rooster tail and you just, it's so horrible. So I agree. My commuter bike has fenders on it, and I do use my commuter bike for a certain amount of touring too, just because it's kind of set up for it. And the fenders make, I don't mind riding in the rain at all, because you can, wear a decent shell and not care too much about the rain or the snow that's coming down. But it's the slush and the water that comes off the road that's unpleasant, and the fenders make a huge difference in that.
So fenders do a great job of limiting the amount of that stuff, but it doesn't absolutely stop it. So I don't know, most of you or many of you probably take your cars or trucks to a car wash periodically in the winter. And the goal is you might want that nice glossy paint to show again, but we're also really trying to get all that salt and corrosive chemical, whatever they put on the roads these days, away from the undercarriage and all the other delicate moving parts of the car. We want to do the same thing with the bike once in a while. I know it can be very difficult to wash a bike. There's a lot of ways to do this.
Wait, you wash your car?
I actually don't wash my car, but I do wash my bike.
I wash my bike way more often than I wash my car.
But the car is actually, I put like a lanolin based wax on the cars in the fall, and I just kind of leave it there, and then I give it a nice good wash in the spring. And I do something similar with my bike. So I just buy a little can of this lanolin stuff, this rust stopper, and a lot of different brands out there. And I spray like the inside of a steel frame. I'd like to spray things that aren't just going to get filthy. But even with that, like what I'll often do is sometimes I'll just take a couple water bottles, fill them up with nice warm water from the tap. I'll get home from a ride, or if I'm going, I'll get home from a ride. I'll fill a couple of these up. This is the simplest way to do it. Go outside, and I'll just kind of squirt down all the stuff that has junk from the road. Get all that crud, slush, salt, and rinse it off the chain, especially the chain and all the other stuff tied to the drivetrain, the brakes, anywhere it might have got. I know I have a bike that's broken because of road salt. I have friends that have catastrophically just like their bike breaks.
Yeah, definitely a bigger issue, if you're riding a steel frame bicycle like routinely in salty conditions. I've seen that same thing where it can it can actually corrode. Sometimes there are little vent holes from the welding or brazing process, and stuff infiltrates there, and it can weaken the frame. Less of a problem with aluminum, although it does interact with the salts.
Mhm.
But yeah, the rinsing, that's a, the rinsing tip with the bottles is good. I've been known to just take, saucepans and hurl them at my bike, but it sounds like the bottle would be much more targeted.
Yeah, well, you
Um,
can get a nice squirt. You can get a hose too.
yeah,
If it's
yeah,
really bad, I'll run a hose from the utility sink out the back door and spray the bike off. And then
you
what I
know,
like to do after that is I let the bike dry. And then once it's let most of the water out, if it's above freezing outside, then it's good. If it's really cold, some of that water is going to freeze. I don't have a heated space other than our laundry room. I'll bring it right in, let it warm up, and then I'll put some fresh chain lube on the chain, and that's good. For what I do, that's good enough.
And a couple points on that, because come to think of it, I have used the water bottle trick before too, but what I have had happen, speaking of like after you rinse your bike and you put it into a cold space, is I've had cables freeze in the housing a little bit. And so like you have to kind of like sometimes, oh, why are my brakes working? Or why isn't this thing shifting? And so sometimes, if you can warm it up and put a little lube on your cables, that can help prevent that problem. And so tell me what you think of this. Like in the wintertime, I run a much heavier lube than I do in the summer. In the summertime, I'm all about, light lube, self-cleaning. In the winter, I'm a little bit more willing to put on, a heavier, more viscous lube, just because the chain is going to take more abuse. What do you do?
I do the same thing. So in the summer, I often use a dry chain lube. It's a wax-based
Yeah.
lube, and those are great in the summer because it's like as long as it's not really wet. The dry lube is just that, it's dry. It doesn't attract dust and other particles, and it keeps the drivetrain clean. But in the winter, that stuff washes off so quickly. So
Right.
I find the
Right.
heavier wet lubes, even though they're a little bit messier initially, they don't just fall off the chain as soon as the first weather element interacts with it. And so they stick around longer and they add more protection for a longer period of time.
Good. So yeah, so your maintenance of the bike after you come back in, rinse it off if you can, remember to lube it. And before you take any ride, do, the air brake and chain quick check to, see how it's working before you go out that next day. We're at 7:44, and this is a good time to see if there are there have been some great comments in the chat box. I like the one about making sure you have or be aware that when you're riding in super cold temps, battery life can be a little shorter than it is ordinarily. I mean, anyone who's ever had a phone in really cold conditions know that that's true. The battery tech for lights is similar. If you know you're going to be out for a while, having a backup light. So thank you for that comment, Bob S. Any other comments or questions or observations that the participants here want to share? You can put your hand up using the Zoom feature, and we'll get you into the conversation. Any thoughts or comments? Or otherwise, Eric and I are just going to continue to banter about winter bike tech. I don't know what that was.
The ocean.
It sounded like Eric was hosing off his bike.
Well, so another thing that we haven't covered yet is where we're going to ride. And
Yes.
I tend to think a little bit more and plan ahead where I'm going to go on a bike. It's not even on trails. If I'm mountain biking, I'll try to find places, but particularly if I want to get to the grocery store, if I'm trying to commute, if I'm trying to go for a recreational ride on the road, then I'm going to think about where are the roads that are first of all, what are the conditions of the road? If it's just snowed, have the plows had a chance to do their job, and have they cleared the area? Is it an area where I know the shoulder or the side of the road is just going to be slush covered? And yes, I could take the lane and ride in the lane, but I prefer to have a little bit more space. So I try to find roads that I know are going to be, or I try to find opportunities to look for roads and routes that are going to be safest. Are they going to be cleared? Are they going to allow me to ride in comfort? Are they far enough away from a lot of traffic one of the things I often will do in inclement weather is I'll take the long way. I'll find roads that are maybe less traveled, and that way there's less cars passing me. And every time a car passes, especially when the road's really messy, you get that spray that comes off the back of the vehicle and it goes on me, and it's just
Yeah,
unpleasant.
and moreover, it's like, often when it's if the shoulder is covered with something slick, and you might be weaving a little bit more, you might be finding your front wheel kind of drifting a little bit more. That's another reason to perhaps pick a quieter road than you ordinarily will, because I've had that situation of you're on a snow covered road, and suddenly the bike is kind of moving sideways. So finding the quieter street is good. And in any event, after a snowstorm, that your shoulder is going to be probably covered. The road is going to be a little bit more narrow. And so thinking a little bit about, like, as Eric says, the chiller route can make your commute a little happier.
And give yourself more time. If you know, even if you're not taking a chiller, slower route, you're likely traveling a little bit slower. So just help yourself out, plan ahead so you don't have to rush. And if you're when you're traveling in weather conditions that are a little bit more challenging, if you're traveling at night, especially if you're going somewhere where you're less, particularly if you're not going to like meet someone else or find other people out and about, send somebody a quick text or leave someone a note just to let them know where you're going. And that way, if you're not back at a certain time, someone's there and will notice and help you
Well,
out.
it's a good thought, particularly if you're riding trail. I mean, it's one thing if you're riding, to work and back, or even if you're taking a road ride on a day that's somewhat a little bit more open. But if you go out for, a fat bike ride and it's, 15 degrees out when you start and you're into the night and something goes wrong, that's a potentially, life-threatening situation. And so, one of the things, just for general, off-piste kind of riding, skiing, whatever, is, think about your escape plan. Think about what happens in the worst case scenario and have a backup plan. Bob Bob is our expert on battery life tonight, makes, the excellent observation that, you put the phone inside your layers to keep it warm and you'll get a lot more life out of it. A lot of times, if I know I'm going for a long ride, I will actually switch my phone to, I'll toggle off the wireless, I'll toggle off Bluetooth, I'll even, in some cases, put it into airplane mode, and that saves a lot of battery. But, your phone is potentially your lifeline to safety. So you want to be making sure you're taking care of that and making sure it'll work if you're going to go out into the side country or the back country. And also think about, worst case scenario, how are you going to get out? I think Eric's tip about, letting people know roughly where you're going to be and what time you expect to be out is great advice, whether you're hiking, skiing, biking, snowmobiling, whatever it is. Giving people a little advance notice of your plans when you get off the beaten path is just sort of fundamental, safety.
So you can probably tell, Jim and I really enjoy riding bikes, and I tend to gravitate towards a bike regardless of the time of year or the weather. I like the challenge, but I also just really like being on a bike. And just like it's nice to be on a bike on a nice summer day, it can be really enjoyable to be on a bike on a winter day or a winter
Awesome.
night.
Today was awesome.
Today was great. And right now, I've gone out on some night rides in the winter, and at the night, depending on what time of night you're choosing or early morning, you can find such peace on a cold, clear winter night. So I really encourage all of you to give it a try. Maybe it's not going to be a long ride, or maybe it will. We're going to leave you with a couple uh, final thoughts, a summary, if you will, of what we've talked about. And hopefully you can all see the slide deck now. So just a quick summary of what we breaking it down into safety and comfort and maintenance. So safety is really paramount to what Jim and I wanted to convey to all of you. Just make sure that we're being as predictable as we can if we're traveling near other traffic. So make sure that we can see, make sure that they can see us. Don't surprise people, and then be a little bit prepared for the conditions out there. far as comfort goes, like I don't think we really need to talk much more about that. We all know how to dress for cold conditions. We're Mainers. We know what it's like to be cold, and we love our winters. And then maintenance, like it's a catastrophe when you have a nice bike, or even it's your only bike, and you just one time you ride it in the winter, and then you kind of put it away and you don't think about it again, and you pull it out a few months later in the spring, and the chain is no longer individual little links that move. Instead, you got like this welded decoration in an ellipse shape, and that's
Put
it.
it in your garden.
It's toast at that point. So take care of your bike especially when it gets really cruddy, and you're going to have a bike that loves you back. So if at this time, like, does anyone have? Please ask additional questions if you do have any, or any other thoughts.
Here, let me show a picture. Stop sharing the screen for a second.
Sure.
This is the quintessential riding after dark image, which was just from.
While Jim's getting that started up, we have one comment. Carry a whistle, or carry something that can actually call people to you in case they can't hear your voice. And a lot of backpacks, they have
A lot of backpacks have that built in. I don't know. Can you guys see that? This is
yeah, it's coming right through.
Some of the conditions in Cape Elizabeth recently have been just outstanding. This is just a narrow little ski track down by Gullcrest, riding Monday night. So fun, so peaceful, like Eric was saying. And there's just something, a little special about being out in the cold and in the dark and in the forest and on your bike. It really is a lot of fun.
And in conditions like that, there's no noise from the tires on the ground. It's like you're passing through this cloud. It's pretty cool. Whereas normally mountain biking, you're hearing like the rocks and the roots and the dirt, everything's mixing around. So it's that peace, it's that meditation. So, well, thank you so much for joining Jim and I this evening. And I'll leave you this last slide here. If you want to get in touch with either one of us to either propose what you would love for us to banter about coming up in the future, or if you have a question that you would like to ask off of Zoom, feel free to reach out and contact either one of us. And we really look forward to seeing you next time, 2 weeks from tonight, on the next Wednesday webinar.
Well, thank you all. Have a great night, and keep the rubber side down. Quote Charlie.